and bought into the ideas and the concept of the individual. When you buy into the concept of the individual, you commit cultural suicide because it's culture that makes individuals come together and become a whole or a group. But that's no longer important because I'm now the individual. I operate as the individual. And one of the things that I don't realize is that there is no way for me to be free as a group or as a whole or culturally as long as I'm the individual, because I believe in the concept of the individual. That's basically essentially what I was just taking from what you were just saying. And when I became the individual, I became finite because as the group, as the people, I was infinite because I.
If I asked you to get a piece of paper and something to write with, and to make a numerical list of all the things that you would be willing to die for, how long is your list?
Panther 48.
Willing to die for.
Panther 48.
Willing to die for. How long is your list?
What is the tribal self?
Panther
The
48.
tribal self is what goes above the immediate acquaintances of the social.
Willing to die
The
for.
family, the people you know, live next door.
You would be willing
I'm
to
talking
die
about
for.
tribal self.
Panther 48.
I'm talking about those living, those yet unborn, and those who are the
How
ancestors.
long is your list?
So the connection with the ancestors is tied into the tribal self.
Panther 48.
What does that mean? That means that the tribal self constantly reminds us
Willing to die for.
that we don't have the
How
right
long is your
to
list?
claim independence.
Panther 48.
Peace and power. Once again, it's your Panther 48. This is your brother Sight calling out of Texas. I got brother Robert Ward Williams, the master procrastinator himself, calling out of San Diego, California.
All power people, comrades.
And I got brother E, the Minister of Information Emeritus, and the game player calling out of Miami. I mean, calling out of Florida, not Miami. I ain't gonna tell y'all exactly where he at. He calling out of Florida though.
Close enough.
Today we're gonna continue on the series that we've been building on. And if y'all been paying attention, y'all been riding with us, y'all know that we've been building on culture, and we've been digging deep into the concepts and ideas of culture. We have a few videos that one of our good brothers and comrades done for us on the YouTube channel called No Binary Intellect. Y'all ought to check that out. And so today we're gonna pass the mic directly to brother E, so he can give us an opener on today's discussion. Today we're gonna talk about cultural suicide. Brother E, go and take us into it.
At least from my end of it. But essentially, it's the idea of Sight. Give us a definition real quick of revolutionary suicide.
Well, revolutionary suicide. U.P. Newton wrote a book called Revolutionary Suicide, and in it he basically explained revolutionary suicide like this. He said that you could have a person or a group of people in a situation where their freedom have been taken from them, and what they do is they decide to struggle against the people, the group, the system that has taken that freedom away. Now they know that this struggle that they have decided to start for their freedom is going to cost their life, but they do it anyway. And then the masses or the people on the sideline watching will see the acts of these people that have decided to dedicate themselves to liberate themselves at the cost of possibly their life. And they say, man, those people are suicidal. They want to die. They're doing some crazy stuff that's gonna make the apparatus of the state come against them and eliminate them. But he said that it's a different type of suicide. He said that you have two types of suicide. One type of suicide is when the problems of life get so bad you can't take it anymore that you go and you jump off a bridge. That's called reactionary suicide. But he said that you have a type of person that when the problems of life get so bad that you can't take it anymore, that you decide to fight against those problems, even though you know that those problems will cost your life. That's the revolutionary suicide. The revolutionary sees that it's much preferred to die for the ideals of freedom than to live without that freedom. So that's the revolutionary suicide. So those are the two types of the positive or the negative types of suicide, where you commit yourself to a cause, even though you know that it might cost your life. That's the revolutionary suicide. And the way that he end the book, I think it's a beautiful book. Everybody that haven't read it, if you consider yourself revolutionary, you can check it out. But the way that he ends the book is he talks about an old man who's trying to move a mountain with a spoon. I think he got this story from Chairman Mao, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that he quotes in the book. But he says that he's trying to move a mountain, big mountain, with a spoon, and he's shoveling the mountain with a spoon. And he said that people come through. A wise man came through, saw this foolish old man, and laughed at him and said, "Man, what are you doing?" He said, "I'm moving a mountain." And he said, "Man, you can't move a mountain with a spoon." So the wise man walked off laughing. And as he continued his task, other people in the city walking by, and they see him, and they like, "Man, he's actually getting something done. He might have moved this much to the mountain." So other people grab a spoon. His kids, his grandchildren, the people that follow in his bloodline, they grab a spoon and they start moving the mountain. Then the community see his family and they grab a spoon and they start moving the mountain. Now they're making progress. And in the story in the book Revolutionary Suicide, he says that finally the heavens open up and angels come from the heavens and they grab the mountain and move the mountain in one fell swoop. It's the act of the old man, his family, and the community participating in the project of moving one mountain from one side to another with a spoon that touches God's heart and causes the whole mountain to move. And he said that's what revolutionary suicide is about. He said that while basically one person may not be able to move the mountain of oppression, but the one person putting in that undying effort to move that mountain will touch the heart of others, and it will cause others to move the mountain. Essentially, what he said is that the revolutionary can never move the mountain of oppression. It is the people that moves the mountain of oppression, but it's the revolutionary who is willing to commit revolutionary suicide to make it happen, that it has the responsibility to touch the people in a way that causes them to move their own mountain. But essentially, that's my understanding of revolutionary suicide.
Okay, so to summarize briefly, so that everybody has something concise to take into the conversation, would you agree revolutionary suicide is essentially the act or acts of challenging a system, knowing fully that it may well cost you your life?
And I must give you your props with that, because that is exactly what I said with all of that banner that I just gave. Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Just that one piece right there. That's what I want to work with. That's that right there. So then the difference between the two would be the idea that someone who commits revolutionary suicide is doing it for a purpose or a cause or a reason that's bigger than themselves, bigger than their fingertips, bigger than their wants and their desires and their immediate surroundings, their feelings and emotions.
True indeed.
So I would say that is where cultural suicide comes in. That difference between someone who commits revolutionary suicide and someone who commits reactionary suicide, they're both the same act. You know, whether you're killing yourself quickly or you're killing yourself over a period of time because of the habits that you keep, overeating, whatever it is, to the point that it affects your health and ends up destroying your life, is done because of whatever psychological issues you have. Whereas if you take some type of cultural position, some type of bigger than self ideal or mindset or purpose in someone's life, then the acts that you are involved in, even though you know that what you're doing is going to kill you, you still pursue them because you understand that it's bigger than you. And that difference between the two is the culture. And let me show this. I want to show this picture real quick.
Here we go. Save the children. See it.
All right. So can you see it?
Yes.
Y'all remember Save the Children, right? They were saving the babies and all that bullshit they were supposed to be doing.
Remember the concept.
You know, there was a charitable foundation that it was big, a huge conglomerate, just all over the place. But this is their logo. And it was very, very popular. It was the whole like Sally Struthers feed the children in Africa, Ethiopia bullshit type level of stuff. But this is their logo. And can you see it?
Yes.
Now, can you see in the logo what I'm talking about?
Is it what about, I don't know. What is it, a ankh? What are we looking at?
I see a snake swallowing a head.
Oh Lord.
Or an head.
All I see, and I know it got to be something else there, but I can't see it. All I can see is the Save the Children in this little red logo. Look like a child got his hands up in the air like Minister Minor or somebody.
All right, so right here. Can you see that?
Look like an eye.
Yeah. You see the circle with the eye?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's and I think that you know, feeds into the idea of culture and kind of tie it in later on. But so we went from so-called slavery back in the slave days, and this is on some of those songs, some of the old ones that I did, ones with who was that? Naeem Akbar. And he did what we like to do, definition. And so at one point in our history in this country, for us, freedom meant, or bondage or whatever, freedom meant getting away from slavery, having chains on our arms, having dogs, watches, guns at the gun line surrounding us, being physically kept in a position of servitude. And as time went on, so the idea of freedom was a physical concept. It was tangible. We knew, we could see, we could talk about, we could point out exactly what that monstrosity was. We knew what freedom wasn't. So freedom had to be the opposite. Once we were able to get off of the plantation and get away physically from massa and all the things that came along with massa, the concept of freedom became a little bit more, or a lot more, ambiguous. It became more of an idea of participating, where we were, you know, sharecroppers and beggars and whatnot. For us, freedom became having the opportunity to have business, to strive, to thrive, to own our own homes and do all of these things that that basically we saw white folk doing. We wanted to participate in that American dream. We wanted to have homes. We wanted to have cars. We wanted to have, you know, families with have a little white picket fence around the house and all of that sort of thing. And then again, as time went on, and we got closer to the 60s and that kind of crossroads, that parting of ways of two ideologies, you know, up until that point, Malcolm's idea of Black nationalism to a degree was what we lived. You know, Black folks in the Black neighborhood, we took care of it, we participated, we interacted. You get a whooping from one parent on the way home because you messed up, you get spanked by somebody all the way home till you get to your house. So it was communal. But then as we achieved that participation, that buying into the American dream, it wasn't enough, because we were sold another bill of sale that to be free actually meant to be with the oppressor, in the context or in the status of the oppressor. It was no longer enough to simply participate and have a job. Now we wanted to be part of management. We wanted to be next to white folks. We wanted to marry white folks, go to their churches, go to their, you know, their restaurants, eat the food that they, even though we don't know good and well white people can't cook, we want to eat the food that they made. So it was no longer enough to simply participate. We were sold this idea that we essentially had to be them in order to be free. Let me
add something. Not trying to cut your wisdom, but I'm gonna say something that I think that it may knowing you inspire you a little more. I'm gonna play God's advocate right quick, based on everything you just said. Okay, so if you take a people who have not experienced freedom for like the last few centuries, you know, hundreds and hundreds of years of generational slavery, then you got to understand that every word, every phrase, every idea we talk about is a concept first in the mind. So Black people are coming out of slave culture thinking freedom without a true definition of what freedom really is. So they can only base freedom on what freedom looks like. And the only people that they ever see who seems to be free are white people. So automatically these people who don't know what freedom looks like would say to themselves, well, the only way I can be free is if I'm acting like them. So I need to integrate into their culture. I need to work in their jobs, eat their food, go drink their coffee, go sit on their stools. If I can do that, then maybe I'm free. Could that be a possibility of why we wanted to sit on white people's toilets and things of this nature? That our leaders and even the mass of the people started identifying freedom with the only group of people in the society that they've ever seen who seem to be free. And I say seem to be because if we understand the definition of freedom, we know that the average masses of the white person was not actually free. They were just another system of control in that system of non-free. So that a small percentage of people could actually be free. But go ahead.
Right, and I don't see where that conflicts at all. Yes, absolutely, and that's kind of what I was going around to get back to, is that in our communities we had a level of freedom, even though we were segregated. We were able to participate with one another when integration hit. And remember, integration was pumped up by a class of Black folk in our community, was pumped up by a class of Black folks. Most of the integrationist organizations, Dr. King included, were funded by a white system, by the system of oppression. The folks who were pumping it up, including Dr. King, were upper middle class Black folks. You know, these were the cats that went to college and had pledged. I think Dr. King was an alpha, but they had money. They had Black money, put it like that. They were hood rich. And so it made sense for them, because that's a pursuit that they saw pay off for them as individuals, because they had begun buying into the idea of individual freedom. And having that system reward them for that idea and pushing that idea, just push that idea along. And that's why I say we came to a divergence, you know, where this idea of integrating with them or maintaining our own. And that's something we didn't understand, didn't comprehend as a whole. Cats like Malcolm did, that you can't have a Black community and integrate. If there's only this much money coming into the community, that money is either going to benefit the community or it's going to flow out and benefit somebody else. There's no in between. You're either free or you're a slave. So the money that we had going in our own communities, where we had Black teachers, Black attorneys, Black grocery store owners, Black, all of this stuff, money circulating, when we began to integrate so that we could go and be like them and be a part of and be next to, mimic them and their concept of freedom, all that money left, and left those who were, quote unquote, stuck in the hood. So, and it's at that point, essentially for me, that we bought into, again, this is what I mentioned last week, their concept of freedom, or their concept of their concept of freedom is based on individual ability. What can I as an individual do? That's what they do. Our understanding of freedom and humanity and all of those things, in fact, our freedom is tied very intimately to our humanity. So being able to express that humanity, being able to invest in that humanity had always been, for thousands of years, our definition of freedom, our definition of our existence and our purpose. When that was taken away from us with enslavement and the breaking off of us into individuals as opposed to communities that we were when we got here, that was replaced with there. It's just like the military. When you go into the military, they separate you from your family. They shave your head. They take away your civilian clothes. You are no longer that person. You are now who we call you. Or in the penitentiary, same shit. Shave your head, take your clothes. You are no longer psych. You are inmate, blah, 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 blah. They give you a new identity. When they gave us a new identity, it was an identity based on their reality, which is an individual existence. One of the first things that white folks do when we talk about slavery and all of that is say, I had nothing to do with it. Well, yeah, you're right, you dumbass. That was not what we're talking about. And that's one of the things, I mentioned before, our biggest issue that the three of us never, I don't think ever really understood the profundity, how deep this shit is. Just not even Black power, not, Black culture, not none of the things we talked about. Just the idea of the individual. There's no way you can convince an individual mind that they're a part of a community, because community is about giving up of self for the sake of the whole, giving up of not necessarily self, but the individual and the ego for the sake of investing in something bigger. It's a revolutionary lifestyle as opposed to the reactionary lifestyle that we have now. If something doesn't affect me as an individual, it's just like these cancer foundations and all these organizations. When do people, especially rich motherfuckers you see on TV, when do people really get involved with something like a cancer shit? We get involved when somebody we know has cancer. We get involved because I got cancer or my auntie got cancer, some shit like that. It's not that we really care. It's now that we are affected individually, and we can identify personally and see, oh, this is a problem for me. Not that it's been a problem for umpteen years and I should have been involved. Maybe I could keep my auntie from getting cancer, but we don't realize it. We're not aware of it. We're numb to the pain because we're, chimpanzees, all these chimpanzees, screaming out YOLO while we live life like living our best life like kidnappees, and don't realize that we're still victims of the greatest kidnapping on the face of the planet. So until that individual mind is breached, until it's broken through, that mind cannot conceive of anything greater than itself by definition. By definition, an individual is its own God. By definition, an individual is its own purpose and reason for being. So if you're talking about something that's out there, you're talking a different language. Prior to integration, that wasn't as much of an issue, because we did still, even in that brother that was, I forget the brother's name, I think it was just some random cat I saw in a documentary, but he put it very, very well. He was talking about segregation actually continued to provide us the opportunity to be a community and be a part. But when we bought into that individual idea, when we bought into the idea that if it doesn't affect me personally, good or bad, getting a better job or somebody getting cancer, whatever it is, if it doesn't affect me personally, it's really not my problem. Prior to integration, we understood, even subconsciously in the back of our mind, that we were a community, that we were a people. It was still there. It was still evident. It still came out in the things we did. But since integration, when we've laid it down and bought into their idea of death, and remember, being an individual necessitates the reality of death, because individuals die. That's just how that works. An individual is going to die. Death is the king in the kingdom when the kingdom is full of individuals. And that's what we're living. That's what we're experiencing. That's what I mean when I say that we bought into their idea of death. We bought into their idea that my individual existence is what is paramount, is the most important. And we've given up this idea of our collective experience. And so we've given up our eternity. We've given up something bigger than ourselves to fight for. Because the individual can't fight for anything bigger than itself, because the individual is the biggest thing there is. The individual is the most important. Like you were talking about megalomania, egomania, that's what this is. Your ego is the most important thing in existence to that ego. And if you're not speaking to that, which being a community, being revolutionary, all of those things speak to something that the individual ain't trying to hear. So when you take that away from the revolutionary, because like your man said, the people are basically revolutionary. The people want to live a lifestyle that's counter to the shit that's going on right now, which is revolutionary. But if you take away that purpose, now you have a bunch of reactionary individuals. And so that's the difference. That's when we lost revolutionary suicide and bought into reactionary suicide as a lifestyle. Cultural suicide, giving up our culture, murdering our culture, throwing it away, was the death knell for revolutionary suicide. And that to me is the pivot. That's the difference. If you don't have a greater purpose, you're committing reactionary suicide on a daily basis. You're killing yourself on a daily basis. Even if you just talk about somebody who wants to be vegetarian for better health, there's some purpose there that's driving them, assuming that they're actually doing it and pursuing it to the best of their abilities. There's something there that's bigger than their ego. Because being a vegetarian, number one, means the food you eat ain't gonna be as tasty as the shit everybody else eats. So the individual wants the food that's tasty first. That's the first thing. That's the first thing they want. We eat to enjoy it as opposed to eating to live. So even just a simple act of being a vegetarian or whatever is an act that is driven at something bigger than ourselves, bigger than the ego, bigger than the individual, just because it involves sacrifice of that ego, of that want, desire, and that immediate gratification. And so that to me is the difference. That's cultural suicide, is the difference and the key determining factor between revolutionary suicide, reactionary suicide, between the individual and the communal.
I like the idea you just building on, because when you think about, now we're talking about paradigm. That's what we're really talking about. And based on what I just heard you explain, I'm taking it that this is what you're saying. That, because we talked about, last video, we talked about the fact that the concept of the individual did not always exist amongst human beings. That concept was created. And the average person listening to this think to themselves, man, these people crazy. It's like they're trying to convince me that the concept of having feet didn't always exist. I know for a fact I have feet. And so the average person is sitting there thinking to themselves, I know for a fact I'm an individual. I'm sitting right here. How are they going to tell me that the concept of the individual didn't always exist? But these was ideals. These was just like freedom. When I talked about freedom when we first started, and I said that for people who, for the purpose of this conversation, never even understood the concept of freedom, because we talk about generations of slavery. So you have people born never experiencing freedom. So freedom is an ideal that's completely removed from this particular group of people. And the only time they even experience or see freedom, or even have an inkling of what freedom is when they look out at their captor, when they look out at their slave master. They see or they identify, okay, those are the people that are free. So when a people like this start struggling toward freedom, then really what they're struggling toward is being more like their captor. They tell themselves, those people are free. I don't like the state that I'm in. I want to be free. So what I need is what he has. Not even understanding that even what he has is not really actually freedom. It's just the only understanding of it. Same thing happened when we was taught and bought into the ideas and the concept of the individual. When you buy into the concept of the individual, you commit cultural suicide, because it's culture that makes individuals come together and become a whole or a group. But that's no longer important, because I'm now the individual. I operate as the individual. And one of the things that I don't realize is that there is no way for me to be free as a group or as a whole or culturally, as long as I'm the individual, because I believe in the concept of the individual. That's basically essentially what I was just taking from what you were just saying. And when I became the individual, I became finite, because as the group, as the people, I was infinite, because I had always existed. As many brothers have said before, you had been everywhere on the planet. And even when you wasn't there personally to meet new people when they came to the shores, you left monuments of yourself. You left monoliths identifying that you was there. You had signed the planet with your creativity. But when you became an individual, you lost all that, because all of those monolithic monolithic, great thing that you as a group had created belongs to the group. But when you became an individual, you lost that connection, that umbilical connection to your history and your past, and you just became born January the 1st, 1970 to January the 1st, 2020, or whatever it is that a particular individual died. You lost that ability to be immortal, because only through your people and your connection to your culture are you really immortal. If you became that individual, you separated yourself from that, and you became mortal. That's basically what I'm getting from you, or the thoughts that you sparked in my mind while you was saying the things that you were saying.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, in your one of your favorite books, Revolutionary Suicide, it even says in there, if you met a cat, and I'm paraphrasing, if you met a cat in ancient times walking across the Serengeti, and you said, "Hey, who are you?" He would respond, "I am we," because our identity was completely attached to those around us. And the individual mind says, but then I can't do what I want to do. I can't get the nice things, the pretty things, the things I've been told are about freedom and da-da-da-da-da. And again, that goes back to, it's been the process. We talk about the process. Bringing us here and breaking us down in process similar to going to the penitentiary and going to the military, where they took us away. That was probably the harshest thing they could have done, was to take cats from a particular nation. I hate the word tribe because it just got such a negative connotation, but a particular nation and nation. And as a side note, let's understand, the United States is not a nation. Nation refers to your blood. It's related to the word natal and all of those things that come with your birth. So the Black nation is a group of Africans who were related by birth. The United States, we're not related to these people at all. So we're not a nation. They try to throw that around and say we're a nation, all that, we're not. But they would take us, ripping us apart from the way that we defined our reality, from our ability to find a place for us to exist and be significant. Because the reality of it is, nowadays, the individual is completely insignificant to the bigger picture. Don't nobody give a shit what the individual thinks. Until you're part of some big group that's throwing money around or got some type of political sway or influence, you're meaningless. So our concepts of our humanity and our reality tied us directly into the bigger picture off the top. And we were then able to perceive ourselves on a, not even global, but universal, throughout the entire cosmos as a part of this reality. What was it in Roots when, what's his name? Kunta Kinte's daddy picked him up, lifted him up to the stars and said, "Behold, the only thing greater than you, it's because of our relationship." The pyramids are laid out. They thought the pyramids were thrown off because two of them were in line and one was off. If you look over top of them, two of them are like that, and then one is up here. So for years, people, they were like, oh, they messed up. They meant to make it a straight line, but it's here. But no, if you look at the stars in the belt of what they call Orion, the constellation Orion, or we call Osar, but if you look in the belt in the constellation of Orion, there are two stars in that belt, and one of those stars is up, exactly laid out or the pyramids are exactly laid out as those stars. And if you look further at some of the other temples and whatnot, it goes further into the constellation of Orion. So our relationship to the entire cosmos was based on our interaction and our being related to one another. They took that away from us. Now we're these screaming individuals who are lost, helpless, hopeless, don't know what to do. Someone throws us a lifeline of simply existing. And of course, human nature is to survive. That's the first rule of living, is survival. You have to survive. And so we got moved into this mindset of no longer living, but of simply surviving, that persisted over all these years through the process that we've been here, and has broken us down and broken us down. We tried to hold on to our own, and it's still there. It's still within us. It comes out in ways that we can't control and are not aware of. That picture I was showing, the idea of hiding information and talking to each other in the pictures, that's what we do. They got that shit from us. But it's a matter of learning what those pictures are and understanding, again, connecting with that who we were, so that we begin to see the signs and whatnot, because that's a part of our culture. But the process with them ripping us from our roots in Africa and all the way up to the point of integration where we said, fuck it, we buying in, fuck it, we individuals, give me some nice shoes, give me some tickets to the LeBron game, give me the all of this material shit that appeases the individual ego that we've been taught for so long. And going to school, having our children grow up with these people who, number one, most of which are child molesters. You don't know anything about these teachers in these schools. You don't know anything about the principals or the janitors or any of these. When we were in the Black community, so-called segregation, when we had Black folks in our communities, we didn't have that shit running around. Yeah, you have individuals here and there and pop up, they get dealt with in our communities. But this is a lifestyle for them. That's why it keeps coming up everywhere. Jeffrey Epstein was a millionaire or billionaire based off of his ability to hook up old white men with little kids. This is what the fuck they do. And this is what we bought into. So we send our children to these schools with these white folks who have a well-documented history. George Washington raped 16-year-old girls that he owned. This is what the fuck they do. So we bought into it. So we have little pieces of paper with their pictures of their greatest child molesters on them. And we bought into their idea, their concept of freedom, individuality, what it is. It defines our humanity, if that even comes up in conversation anymore. So it's been a process over these years to break down our connection to our community, which is our greatest source of strength, which also makes it our greatest weakness, and break us away from that to the point that we finally said, fuck it, bought into it. And so now we're at a point where we are trying to convince, our job has been to convince these individuals, these individual minds, that there's something greater than them. And that's why I kind of call us to task or you know, lamenting over the shit that we've done over the years, that this idea of trying to unite a community while we were not fully aware of the depths of what it is individuality does, what it is, how it acts, and how it's been made so pervasive in our community. You know, we bought into the idea of individual freedom. And the reality is that a collective accountability, you can't hold an individual accountable because whatever I do is justified because I'm an individual. You know, I do XYZ selling out to people, talk about sex all the time and fuck up little girls' heads and little boys' heads, giving them the wrong information up, but I'm making money. I saw this fat chick, what's her name? Lizzo? Some fat chick on some award show at one point. Cause you know, I watch it every now and then to laugh because it's funny as hell to me that these obese motherfuckers are held up as sex symbols and all of this shit. It's crazy to me, but it's unhealthy. It's just crazy. But she said something to the effect of, people are upset because they say I'm turning fat girls into hoes. Red flag number one. Then she goes on to say, justify it all by saying, I'm also teaching them how to make money. I'm making money. Making money to appease the individual, and the individual pursuit is the end all and be all. So there is no accountability. If you came to the Black community in the 20s and tried some shit like that, you would be, you know, especially if you go back to Africa and try that shit, even just being gay was a problem. Not even the gay craziness, you know, they're taking gayness to a whole nother level. That shit is really megalomania, but they've taken it to a whole nother level. But even then, you know, we don't turn our backs on humanity. When we see another human being, we don't, as an African people, we don't turn our back on them. So the nonsense that they want to pursue, okay, you go over there and do that, whatever. And then after you get through with that bullshit, you come back over here. You know, you still a part of the community, but you on thin ice. So take that shit over there. We don't get down with that. And that's one of the reasons they've got laws that or attempting to make laws and pass laws in various parts of Africa. That's a big problem right now. I don't say problem, but that's a big point of departure. You know, the Western countries are trying to flex their money, saying we're going to continue, we'll give you more money, but you got to get some gay rights going on. You got to get the LGBT whatever community some equal status and whatnot. And it's a whole lot of these governments that are pushing back like, nah, fuck that. That's where we draw the line. You messing with too much of the reality to try to get us to say it's okay to raise a family with two mothers or two fathers or whatever, and raise a child. We know better than that. We've been here for too long. So that's part of the red line for us, and we're not gonna get down with it. But all of these things that we bought into to satisfy the ego, that's all of this shit is. As long as that shit is in place, and we've never, and I think, just us as a part of the growing process, and I mean the three of us, never really understood and never really dug down deeply enough into just that one concept, that individuality. There is no community with individuality. No Black community, no white community. White community is a bunch of individuals, and all the shit that's going on is inevitable. Everything that's going on is inevitable because you have individuals. And as those individuals pursue their own rights, they constantly, or their own freedom, they're moving away from each other. So it just makes sense that over time, they're gonna get further and further away from one another to the point that it can no longer support itself. That's just logic. You come together in a group and you can hold up whatever on your shoulders, but you take a few steps back, it gets harder to hold it, few steps back, and now you 20 or 30 feet away from each other, y'all are not people, you're not gonna be able to support the weight of anything. You're not gonna be able to hold anything up as a group. And if you get far enough apart, you'll never know that you had a group at all. So it's that individual mindset that we're battling, that we're dealing with. And I say that was the crushing act. Buying in, integrating with them, taking on their morals, i.e. the church, their education, the schools, the reflections, and all of those things was the nail in the coffin for any semblance of culture that we had. And so, cultural suicide.
Let me say this, because I think it kind of goes back to what Sykes said, which was called mental molestation. You talked about it from the standpoint of physical, but what it is the mental molestation, because our perception had been hijacked. We don't recognize the language of reactionary suicide. And since our people don't recognize the language of reactionary suicide, but they do gravitate around the I, or the individual that has been taught through hypersensuality and consumption, it causes us to operate from what I refer to as absolute polarization. And absolute polarization has become our reality. And by that being our reality, you're talking about now people that operate without the known unknowns. And if we don't know what we don't know at that point, because we're dealing with stolen away from our true culture, our root culture, should I say, stolen from our root culture. Now we're dealing with a situation where we talk about the unification of the slave as opposed to the singularity of the African. And that's what we're dealing with, because those dynamics can look one and the same. Unification and singularity viewed through the lens of somebody that is, again, not dealing with an intact culture, can seem the same thing. But that unification that we're talking about came as a result of us learning how to survive in a system of enslavement, as opposed to the separation as a process of learning to practice self-determination. And so getting us to recognize how we've been hijacked and recognize the language of reactionary suicide kind of becomes the key. Like you was referencing when you was talking about Hollywood or Hollywood, what I refer to it as, when the upliftment of basically a consumption lifestyle through the individual becomes the appetite of the masses. And by that being the appetite of the masses, like we stated earlier, in regards to a proper diet. Now I'm talking about a mental diet at this point. When we talk about it, the proper mental diet, which puts you in the right mind frame to where you can have a physical proper diet, knowing that at that point, your diet is actually tied to life, as opposed to your diet being tied to survival, which is what people in our community now refer to as soul food, which is slave food. That's because they have tied that condition back to basically making it something that, well, we're going to uplift victimization. We're going to uplift what we've been through victimization. And that's because of the absolute polarization that our folks have gone through, not knowing how to separate and recognize the difference between unification and singularity. And so from a higher standpoint, we have to get them to see that this consumption lifestyle of the individual is death. Kind of like what we said with the original, the name of the show here is death of the revolutionary, which through concept of suicide. And it's only suicidal because the people are not seeing life for what it is and seeing the process of survival for what it is. They feel like because poison is administered through a slow means, then it's about coping with it. And since most people associate coping with an actual solution as opposed to coping with a way to deal with a condition, then they think that they're doing both. They think that they're actually coming up, or they actually prospering, or they actually advance, but they are not. The individual may be, but like you stated about individuals through separation, that individual point of separation comes about because those individuals are consuming more and more and more. And so at that point, they have to have more land, more resources, more everything. They have to suck up more. And the one thing that we recognize on this planet is the one thing that's limited is what? Land. What's limited are these resources. But if I am operating through an individual and going off of that concept of reactionary suicide through centralization and consumption, then I'm not going to take heed to that. I'm going to just go out and get mine. That's what they're taught. That's that mental molestation that is taught throughout the school system.
Two things, well, one's real quick, and this is just for you, Psych. There was actually a time, even in this country, when you talk about the military, that it was, that folks who went into the military in this country were fighting for a cause. This American, whatever. At this point, and Moore can attest to this more than me, because he's been, the military and all of that. Today in the military, cats are in the military for the GI Bill. Cats in the military to get a check to pay for their school. More and more cats in the military for individual reasons. So individuality, so this idea is the difference between a mercenary and a warrior. When a mercenary fights for a check, a warrior fights for a reason. And that's the polar opposites of it. That's the ends of it. What I really want to say is reflecting on our conversation in the text not too long ago, War. I know this fucks with you, and that's why I like bringing it up, because there's not a whole lot of subjects I can bring up that just really make War feel uncomfortable. So I'm gonna keep bringing it up because it makes him feel queasy. But you see all this trans stuff and this big idea of what is a woman? What is a man? And so, and at first, I'm watching this one white guy, Adam Schiff. No, that's not his name. It's somebody big. It's some white guy with a beard. But he likes to go around and give speeches and whatnot on not being trans and why it's bad and all of that. And these trans activists inevitably will show up and challenge him. And so one of the things he likes to do is ask them to define what is a woman. And at first I'm looking like, yeah, that's funny. That's good. He got them, because their only response is anybody. The only response they can have as a woman is somebody who identifies as a woman. So it's this circular logic. What is a woman? Someone who says they're a woman. But what is a woman? Someone who says they're a woman. It's like, why is the Bible right? Because the Bible says it's right. It's that circular logic. It doesn't work. But then I began to really think about it, and I realized it's not a problem of defining what is a woman, what is a man, because a short definition would be, an adult female, that's a woman, or adult male, that's a man. Okay, but then I'm thinking about it, and the question for me then became, well, what is an adult? In this culture, in this reality, the only definition of an adult is 18. To be an adult in this country, there's a legal definition, and that's it. There is no other definition. All you have to do is reach the age of majority. You simply have to fucking exist on your 18th birthday. You're an adult. So if you're a male, you're a man now. That's it. There's no training. We go to be trained on how to drive a car. We go to be trained on, how to cook, or to be a chef, or to be, a doctor, or whatever it is. But there's no qualifications laid out for manhood or for womanhood. as Black folks, especially in the hood, we've all experienced the 13-year-old boy who says, shit, I'm a man. Or a 16-year-old boy says, I'm a man. And the only kickback really that we have is you're not 18. Because that's the only definition for manhood. There is no other definition. You can dog out a woman, you're still a man. Or you're even more of a man. You can sell a bunch of people crack, you a man because you're making money. No, because you're 18. That's the only definition. So the problems, there is no biological definition of what a woman is, because woman and man are cultural concepts. Being male and female are biological, but being a man or a woman is cultural. And in this culture, you hit 18, you're a man or a woman. In our culture, most non-Western European cultures, particularly in ancient times, we've all heard the phrase, but it's lost meaning like so many other things, rites of passage. And we throw them off because they've been in Disney movies and on TV. So it's just something flighty. No, these were very significant things. And if you sit back and really look at it, if you have a 13-year-old boy, 12-year-old boy, it's one of the reasons that you could have in ancient times, cats be 15 and be kings over entire, nations of folks, because there was a process where a boy would go into a rites of passage at 13 or whatever the age was, go through certain steps that benefited that particular community, and would come out on the other end. All right, now you're a man. Now you understand what it is to be a man, how to act as a man, and what happens if you stray from that being a man. There were expectations. It's just like going through orientation at a job, which is real fucked up. You go through orientation to set out the expectations for your job, but you don't go through any type of orientation to set the expectations for manhood or womanhood or fatherhood or motherhood. It's just kind of, here you go. You got a vagina, you can have kids. You turned 18, now you're an adult. Very good, congratulations. And so with there being no definition, the definition becomes whatever we want it to be in the moment. And nobody can say it's wrong. So this white dude I'm looking at, it's like, you wrong, dude. I had to completely turn it. And I wish I could be there at one of his speeches to throw it back at him. Like, yeah, you say a woman is an adult female. Well, what is an adult? I know what female is. I can look in a science book and see, okay, right chromosomes, that's the female. Where do I look to find out what an adult is? Because adult is a key part of that definition, and adult female is a woman. I need to know what an adult is. What is an adult supposed to do? Is an adult allowed to fuck around with little kids? Is an adult allowed to, be a misogynist? Is an adult allowed to say certain things, do certain things, do whatever they want to do, as long as they make money? Is that what an adult is? But we don't have a definition for that. Even in segregation times, we had our own sort of rites of passage. We had our own sort of expectations. And that was a part of our culture. That was a part of our community. When we bought into Europeans, this individual mindset, all we had to do was obey the law, which says 18, so now you're an adult. That was the only qualification we had. So we gave that shit away. We gave our ability to even fucking be men. That's wild. We can't even be men in this culture, except that we turn 18. That's it. So for us, we can't even be men based on our own expectations of what a man is, because there's no accountability, because there's no community to hold me accountable, because I reached 18, goddammit, so I'm a man. You can't tell me otherwise. There is no community, there is no concept, there is no definition of what a man is. So even those basic ideas have been thrown out when we bought into this integration and being around white folks, because this is their shit. This is how they run shit. Even in ancient white times, back in white folks, they had rites of passage where males were laid out the expectations. You're going to be a Viking, you got to be able to lay waste to this. You got to be able to fight. You got to, have your sword game on and all of this type of shit. But they still had expectations that were laid out. In a country, in a capitalist system, in a capitalist system where the idea is that you simply have to cater to the lowest common denominator. You got to cater to the baseline in order to come up in whatever frame or fashion you want, or whatever you choose. You have to appeal to that. That's the only expectation. There is no responsibility, and simply because there's nobody there to hold me accountable except for that law, the rule of law, not a nation of people, but a country of law. And so that's the only thing that's held accountable. And for further proof, for the most part, if you commit a crime at say 13, it's different than if you commit the same crime as a 23-year-old. Why? Because you hit 18, and legally now you're a man. There's no definition in there beyond that. So the only proof of evidence we have is that jumping over that number. And so that's the only accountability that anybody's afforded is the law. There is, if you lay out definitions for your kids when they're growing up, my children, my oldest two, when they were little, they were expected, one of them would wash dishes on odd number days. One of them would fix dinner on odd number days. And on even number days, they would switch. So there was a definition laid out. There's definition. Now there can be accountability. But as long as there's no definition, you can't have accountability. Accountable to what? I turned 18, that's it. I have no accountability, there's no responsibility. I just turned 18. I was responsible to being alive on my 18th birthday. I did it, that's it. So the only ones that can come in and say anything is the law, because the law is the only one that's given a definition. As long as the community doesn't define what a man is or what a woman is, the community has no business even approaching individuals to try to hold them accountable and say, you have responsibility. Nah, the hell with you. I'm 18, I'm a man, I can do what I want to do. And that's where I see it, pretty much where we're at. And that permeates all of that sexual shit and trans shit and all that other stuff. Motherfuckers are just confused because there are no definitions. And you got a bunch of confused children teaching other confused children what it is to be XYZ or XY and XX or whatever it is. And it just gets further convoluted. So until, all of that shit gets addressed, it's like whatever. There has to be some level of definition. And we don't have that. We gave that shit away with integration so that we could get some nice shoes. Fuck off.
Well, I wouldn't say we gave it away. I'd say we had it completely taken and stripped from us. Because one of the things that you just build on, I don't think we gave it away. I don't think that the group of people that was seeking for freedom after slavery even comprehended it completely. As I said earlier, we was looking to be free, and our understanding of the only thing that was free was the captive. Like you love to say a lot of times when we start a show, and we'll ask a question, and you'll always say, in your most annoying way that you like to do things, it depends on who's asking. And we'll be sitting there like, duh, I asked, what the hell you talking about? But we understand that you're talking about from a deeper perspective, because we understand that different groups of people, different cultures had a different definition for this particular thing. So it depends on who is asking on what the definition, like you just said, adult is the age of majority. We're talking about.
My bad. Go ahead. What you addressing is the what or the why. I'm looking at the what. Those are the reasons why, and I think they're okay. I understand, but the what is we said okay, because you can either let this bitch burn, go up there and slit the throat to every one of these Dutch motherfuckers, even though revolutionary suicide, that it's gonna sink the boat and you're gonna die, or you can say, okay, I'm gonna go along. I know I got slavery for the next 400 years. I'm gonna go along, and you give it up. Can't nobody take it from you. There's something that freedom is not something that can be taken away, only given. You can either die on your feet or live on your knees. Ain't that what Huey talked about? And that, to me, that's what he's talking about. I get the why. Those are the reasons that we did it, but we gave it away. We chose to integrate.
But let's go back to where you started the dialogue. See, and I don't know if you said it, but I don't know if you missed it or if you intentionally not building on it. But once you create the individual, there is no community anymore. There is no culture. There is no revolutionary suicide with the individual. So you say we gave it away, but if I convince you that you're an individual, you're automatically going to give it away. If I convince you that the only thing that's important is how much money that you're making, that we can justify every move that we make based on the fact that you're making money from it. If I convince you that that's reality. And here's the thing that we got to understand about paradigms. This is very important, and it's probably too deep for us to go into on this show. This might have to go into a show on its own, because it's very important to understand how the human mind works and what a paradigm is and what a paradigm shift is. See, most people, we have a conversation right now, we sit up and we go to dialogue, and you try to tell the average person, and I don't want to debate this, but if you tell the average person that the mind doesn't exist, average person would be like, what the hell is this fool talking about? We all know that the mind exists. But for European psychology, the mind is simply a construct to define the collection of thoughts that a human being can have. But the mind itself cannot be identified, it cannot be photographed, it cannot be weighed. We can do absolutely nothing to quantify the concept of the mind. So the mind just exists as a concept, and the mind could cease to exist as a concept, and we can call those collective thoughts something completely different. And I'm using that to talk about different things that we take for granted and say, okay, I know that that's real. But at one point, the individual itself was not real. It did not exist. If you go to a certain time, and we could back to the future to a certain time in the past, and a little gray DeLorean, and get out and go to talking to certain groups of people by the individual, they would look at us like, what the hell are you talking about? In certain times throughout human history, if you go to certain groups of people and talk to them about ownership of land, they would look at you like, what is this damn fool? What is this beige man with these funny looking glasses talking about? What is he talking about?
I gotta be beige. What the fuck? I gotta be beige.
But my point I'm getting at is that these paradigms has not always existed. And if you convince a people of these particular paradigms, especially if the paradigm is detrimental to them as a people, then they're going to automatically give away their freedom, as you called it. But that's why I say they didn't give it up, because it was taken by being sold that idea that wasn't real, or that was not as beneficial to us as we would think that it would end up being. That's what I was getting at. Now, I had a point I was getting to when you cut me out, and I forgot where I was going. So I got to get out of it because I forgot what my point was.
And I'll be writing down notes and shit while we going, because I do the same shit. But it all comes back to power. You know, if you can be convinced to not be free, you were never free. Your freedom is something either you have or you don't have, and it's not something that someone can take from you.
But even freedom is a paradigm. Even that idea.
Yeah. Right.
You know what I'm saying? Because if I change your think, like you talk about it all, you love to talk about it. If I change your perspective of what freedom is, then you'll be chasing this loose rabbit down the wrong rabbit hole.
But you can't change my
people
paradigm.
really think our paradigm has been changed. Maybe not you as an individual, but our people have been sold the ideal that freedom is having money.
But you can't sell it to me if I'm not buying it. A particular
type of shoe. Freedom is, I was talking to a brother today, older brother, not older than me, you know, he up in our age range. But I think the brother is too old to operate off this particular this cultural fad that's going on. There's a cultural fad, if y'all probably noticed. A lot of youngsters like to walk through the city in what's some things called slippers or slides or whatever those things are. You know what I'm talking about? Those beach shoes or whatever.
House shoes. Yeah,
house shoes. They coming through. And when I was coming up, now I'm gonna go back to the streets a little bit. When I was coming, we another cultural fad. We had on Dickies t-shirts, LA Raiders caps. Back then, the Raiders was in LA, not open for people. It's like, what the hell is this guy talking about? But you know, this is the way we moved, and we never stepped outside and moved through the community without having shoes on. Why? Because the community itself was a hood. It was a battlefield. We had enemies. You know, we had people that we may have conflict with. You don't want to be outside in no damn slides, and then the enemy come through and go to earn out at you. You go to trying to run and duck with your slides flapping and popping against your heel, and flying off. But you can't operate like that. You understand what I'm saying? And this is what I'm talking about how different concepts or different paradigms can be introduced to a people, and the average person doesn't give thought to what they are doing or why they are doing it. They just do it. They just follow the facts. They don't give thought to what they're doing or why they're doing it. And that's why I say that we didn't give these things up, at least not knowingly, not awarenessly, we didn't do it. And that's how you distract the people. You distract the people by taking their concept. That's what I was going to talk about. You love to talk. You love to say who's asking. We talked about the definition of what an adult was, and in our ancient societies, we had a rites of passage. And the definition, adulthood was defined not by how old you got, not by the fact that you was able to stay alive long enough to have numbers attached to your name. It was defined by you learning the lessons of the community. And then when we got to a certain numerical phrase in your life, you would go through certain particular tests to show that you understood the lessons that your community has been prepping you for your entire life. To become an adult meant that you was to become mature. That's what I meant to say. The word mature literally means to be prepared. That's what it means. So when we recognize a certain level of maturity, it was based on the fact that you was able to demonstrate that you comprehended the lessons that your elders were teaching to you. If you was a boy, you was put with men who was developing you into manhood. If you was a girl, you was put with women who was developing you into womanhood. And once you could demonstrate that you comprehended the lessons you've been given, you'll be given the right to pass from childhood to adulthood. Not just through age, but you'll be given the right to pass to that. And that was one of the things, and I would arrogantly say that was an extremely important part of society that the earth as itself lost when certain groups of people basically took over and started dictating how we was going to operate as a people, because that was important. It was way too important to be left up to age. I was having a conversation with a dude, probably one of the most foolish people I've ever dialogued with, but I was trying to explain to him about how to develop into manhood. And his response to me was, man, can't nobody tell you how to be a man. Don't nobody tell you how to do that. You just be it. You just live and keep getting older, and it just happens naturally. And his thinking, manhood is something that grew on you like hair. You know, as a baby, once you get to a certain age, your hair starts growing. Once you get to another age, your beard and your mustache start growing. This moron, this clown, this imbecile was essentially telling me that manhood just grew on you if you stayed alive long enough. And that's just not how it works. And the fact that too many people believe that is why you have so little shows of manhood in the community. You know, and that's what I wanted to add to what you were saying. I'm agreeing with you. I'm just putting it in my own words, and because I'm seeing it from a different perspective. You know, I'm seeing it from a different, and that's why it's important that you always said, you know, you love to use these old abstract ideas, but that's important why you always say it depends on who's asking. It depends on who's that. And you're right. We done got into this conversation in modern society of what is a man, what defines a man, and what defines a woman, because a man and a woman is a cultural thing, while a male and a female is a biological thing. It can be defined not only by the equipment, because they've mastered cutting the equipment off and reshaping it, but it can be defined by the chromosomes themselves, and there is absolutely nothing you can do about that defines malehood and womanhood. I mean, malehood and femalehood. But femalehood and malehood traditionally transitions into manhood and womanhood once you have the right training and the right cultivation by the adult men and women in your particular society at those particular times. Now the shit is been confused, and that's what Western culture does with most concepts and ideas if you don't nail those ideas down. If you look up the word man, if you look up the word woman, if you look up the word male, female, and you try to get a definition, it's too bleary. And therefore, everybody can claim that I identify as a man. Even if you're a 6-year-old little girl, I identify as a man. And this is where this confusion has come from. But as you said, it's cultural. It is culture. It is not a universal reality that cannot be changed. This is a cultural concept, and what we're dealing with is European cultural concept and we can see the confusion that comes out of that.
Let me say this too, just so we got a clear definition, going back to what happened when I said mental molestation. So the definition of mental molestation is being exposed to something before your comprehension can challenge the act and thereby have a natural defense. And so when we talk about dealing with what I said earlier, a unification or a singularity, when we allow others out to separate us to a degree to where you can interject a definition or a way of life and allow that way of life to set in and perpetuate a natural occurring way of life, then that is how you mess up a whole society. And remember, we're talking about a people whose primary way of survival was weaponizing everybody else against themselves. So when you know that their survival was tied directly to weaponization, then when that culture comes into contact with another culture, what is it going to do first and foremost? It's going to weaponize that culture or that other contact against itself. This goes back into what we were saying about defining manhood or womanhood, whereas now it is defined through what's referred to as time exposure. Time exposure, it defines the merit of accountability now. And it's your exposure that automatically makes that. Like it was stated about a person committing the same crime and now going to jail because they're 18 years old. That's because through the time exposure, that has defined and created that merit of accountability. So where now they can be charged with a crime, whereas before they couldn't. So the absence of a rites of passage allowed the uninitiated to define basically what they want to be, despite having a roadmap that creates parameters for growth, learning, and living. So now after this person has aged, going back to the time exposure, they reach back then and force others to accept them into adulthood, whether that adulthood be roles of a man or woman, or when they're not able to figure that out and deal fully with accountability because their accountability is based upon time exposures and merit, then they come up with this concept called non-binary because they can't decide which one because there was no process. So at that point, I can just be non-binary. And by being non-binary, I can float between either one of those things. So that's where society has took us. And kind of going back to what he was saying to what was uncomfortable. What was uncomfortable is me not realizing until I got into an older age that there is a such thing, according to this society, as a female man or a male woman. That actually blew my mind because I thought the two was one and the same. And so recognizing the destruction that this culture has done to the African-centered mind, again, is why I refer back to that weaponization process as being the concept of us tying in unification and singularity into one definition and not knowing the difference and how that has been stripped from us.
And the cold thing, War, is your confusion comes because for most indigenous people on the planet, those things were connected to one another. Mm-hmm. Being a male moved you to boyhood, then to manhood, depending on your level of performance in the society. Now you could get to 60 years old, and if you didn't perform according to the customs that have been defined by the culture for what defines a man, you wouldn't be considered a man. So manhood was something that wasn't defined by age, just like you talked, both of y'all just discussed about how at a certain age you can't be charged with certain crimes, because this society is essentially saying that if he lives to 18 years old, he has had enough experience to develop the mental maturity to make the right and wrong decision. If he chooses to commit a crime,
not experience, enough exposure. Not enough experience, enough exposure.
But that's what they're saying. That's what they are saying, and that's what they convince the majority of the population to believe. That's what they're saying. When we used to say simply that at a certain very young age, we'll put you with the men And then the men will cultivate your manhood. And then once you got to a certain point, and a lot of times it was actually younger than 18, but once you got to a certain point, we'd give you the opportunity through particular activity to prove to us that you have comprehended the lessons of adulthood that we've been giving you for the last 10, 15 years. And then we'll give you the right to pass on from boyhood to manhood, from girlhood to womanhood. And now there are certain responsibilities and expectations that the society will have upon you because of it. Because as we all know, that with greater status, there's supposed to by nature be greater responsibility. We understand that. And that's the differences between how an indigenous group of people on the planet used to operate and manifest their culture, and the newest people on the planet have been trying to rewire and rewrite culture. That's the difference that I think that it's important to look at. And the reason why we weighed in the past was always talking about rites of passage. And I could tell you that just because a male gets to a certain age doesn't necessarily make him a man, because I was around way too many, this is not to talk down on the young brothers, but I was around way too many, but I'm not even gonna say it's their fault. Way too many young brothers who had big boy charges and big boy time, but had never actually become grown men because they had never been exposed to manhood lessons. It had never happened. And the first time they was exposed to manhood, they was excited about it. They was happy. They was fine. They was feeling like, okay, this will allow me to manifest my role as a man better. You know what I'm saying? So that age thing is not a great identifier of what lessons a person should have learned if they make it to that particular milestone.
So then within the Panther process, when we go into the mechanisms and we talk about the identity mechanism, that's why that's important. Because too often our people are attracted to something without actually operating from a position of empowerment. They're attracted to it simply because they're trying to escape their victimization. And trying to escape victimization basically just makes you a runaway slave. So trying to work with a runaway slave, you're not gonna be able to transform them, because all they want to do is just escape. All they want to do is get away from a quote unquote condition of victimization. But a liberator, going back to revolutionary suicide, realizes that I'm going to go right back into that condition of slavery each and every time to free somebody, and then go right back in that position and free somebody. Whereas a runaway slave, as soon as I get quote unquote free from that condition, that type of bondage, I just don't want to have nothing else to do with anybody else that has anything to do with what I was caught up in. There creates that concept of being able to target that individual and pull them away from the community concept. So our trauma, again, going back to mental molestation, the trauma that we have lived through, the trauma that we have tied ourselves to, continue to allow us to emotionally not let go of something that has happened to us in our childhood. Now, when I say childhood, I'm talking about collective childhood now. When I'm talking about the process that we undergone through the Middle Passage, through the Ma'afa, because so many of our generational lineages are traumatized by aspects of this. We live through our victimization. Living through our victimization makes us accept the situation of being a runaway slave, the condition of being a runaway slave. And that is how we think we should live, which takes us to a process of coping with life, coping with something, as opposed to dealing with revolutionary processes and living. So then we interchange the concept of survival and living to be one and the same, when they're not one and the same. By far not at all one and the same. But because we are stuck in an emotional state of a child that was mentally molested at a young age, and we never was able to come out of that trauma, here we are in our adulthood, still suffering from the same level of trauma that happened to us in a younger age. Therefore, we did not go through any type of rites of passage collectively as a people, which means that my exposure to being around other people of a specific age, physical age group, has defined me to be either a man or a woman. So we're all confused as a result of living through victimization. I'm done on that.
Word.
We figured as much. Look like we're getting short, and y'all don't have a lot more to talk about. I'm gonna cut this out, but I want to do this before we close out. I think there's some things that we need to define. Cause in truth, while he was sitting there talking, he educated me a little bit. I shouldn't tell him that, because I know how easy his ego is. But it made me think about something that I really hadn't really gave a lot of thought to. And he is right. Finally, you know, he got 3 times out of year, he's right. There is no way you can free a people who believe they're individual. That's why we had the problem trying to convince individuals of how important culture was to the freedom of the group. You can't convince that to an individual. It's not going to happen. An individual can't process that. You can't process. That's crazy. We have to go through the process, and this probably take another 100 years to figure out how to do this. We have to actually go through the process of reconfiguring this thing back from individuality back to the group thinking that the people once had, and then they would accept culture, and then they would operate as a free people. You know, it's I said 100 years being funny, but I think about in prison you can see this. You know, it's out here, but it's not out here to the degree that you see it in prison. And I guess it's because you have so little, you have so little in prison. So much has been taken from you that really, truly, the only thing that you actually still have ownership of is identity. So it becomes extremely important. Identity becomes a very important thing. You'll see more people operating from the perspective of their subculture in prison than you will out here. Like, for instance, dudes that's Crips down there, this means something. It's almost religion. A dude that's a blood, a dude, and it's not just these groups, it's Gangster Disciples, Vice Lord, even the Mexican gangs, Tungo Black. This is extremely important. This identity and this identification with those particular groups are extremely important. And the average person would think, well, maybe it's because of the defense and the protection that comes along with it. But it's really not. It's really not. It's the sense of belonging. It's something that's innate in the human being. And once you remove all of these distractions away from the human being and put them in a situation where it's like, damn, I have nothing else to give me value, the human being by nature goes back to identity as the most important thing. If a Crip hears that a Crip that he ain't never met in his life got jumped on the other side of the unit, he want to bring all the Crips together because that becomes important. My Crip brother got jumped on, they don't even know this guy. You know what I'm saying? And I'm thinking about how that identity with a larger group actually gives you that sense of purpose, and it actually mobilizes the people toward a particular goal. But by taking that identity away and getting the people to identify with that individuality, then you also demobilize the people. And the only goal that exists for the individual is my own personal self-gratification.
Ergo, it can't be taken away, it has to be given, because as you said, it's an innate something. There is a built-in drive for all of humanity to connect with other humanity, just like any other animal that's out there, to whatever degree, on whatever level, however they act in their communities. A drive that we have that's very, very natural, innate, for us to come together on some level in some form or fashion. And we choose, because this society is geared that way, we are convinced, we buy into whatever the reasoning, the whys and whatnot, to choose that way, because ultimately it's easier. We all know it's easier to go along with what the bigger group says than to do what it is you feel you should be doing. That's just peer pressure. And that's the way this shit operates, in order to convince us to give up. to give it away, to buy into whatever it is they're selling. So, and it's that innate part of our reality, our humanity, our drive that has been there for millions of years now that we're choosing not to go with. Even at this point, because you ain't even got to, you talk about penitentiary, we can talk about a basketball game. How many times we see a bench clearing fights between two different teams in the NBA because one player got, got a flagrant foul or whatever, and everybody starts fighting, knowing full well that at least two of these cats are going to choose to be on a different team because they get a better deal or a better contract, they're going to go somewhere else. But for that moment, because they got on the same jerseys and they shooting at the same basket, they're a team, they're cohesive. They want to be this one unit, and that feeds into that. People that don't even play the damn sport will fight you over that shit because we have this drive to identify with a bigger something. So it's still that innate shit that we either buy into or we choose to go someplace else. We buy into the individual mindset. So and it's funny because in these professional sports and whatnot, on the one hand, you got that drive to come together. Somebody on another team weighs an extra $30 million in your face, and all of a sudden, okay, I'm gonna be a team over there. I'm gonna be a collective part of that over there. So there's still that individual that we buy into. Because if it was just about us, if we were really choosing, even in something like a team sport, we would be with that team regardless. It wouldn't matter the money. It wouldn't matter the glorification. It would matter, this is my team. This is who I ride and die with. This is who I'm going to be with for the duration. We don't do that. As soon as somebody throws us some money, we'll go with that because of that individual mind that we will, on a day-to-day basis, choose to buy into. So it's still there, but we override it because of the distractions. We override it because there's, some pain that causes us to not want to buy into it, or there's some pleasure that we can run to. A lot of times it's been said, when I was about to have to move to Florida, somebody was saying people either typically will move because they're running from something or to something. They're either going to try to find greener grass or they just don't like the grass over here. They're one of the two. They're trying to get away or trying to get to something, as opposed to finding what it is that's innate within us. So it's still that individual, like you said, paradigm. So there you go. And it manifests itself all over. We can give examples of that type of shit all day long. Your job, regular job. A whole lot of people be at their job for 30 years and would swear up and down by the company they work for. Even though 2 weeks later, the company will fire them because it's financially beneficial for the company to cut your job. That's why, for me, I have no loyalty to a company. I will piss on a company and walk away in 30 seconds. I don't give a shit because I know that's how they feel about me. They'll cut. As soon as it benefits their bottom line, they gone. So as soon as it benefits my bottom line, see ya. I don't care what your money is. You're not playing for me anymore. I'm not playing for you. We're done. But we have that drive to be united somewhere, but we don't buy into that shit, or we buy into it in the wrong places.
You can take that. I don't get dropped. I dropped the label, my state. You don't understand that line, that reference?
Nah, he don't know that. He don't know that song.
What?
It was a reference, but we got 10 minutes. Unless y'all got something else to go into, we can get ready to bring it to a close. Where the hell are you going, War?
I got something else.
He got a damn meeting to go to. You see what I'm talking about?
Here we go.
But I'm tripping. I'm tripping when I be saying what I'm saying.
Auntie done sent him to the store for some ice cream.
Yeah, I did get sent to the store, not ice cream though.
I told you, I know. That's the only reason the dude leave the house. When he get home, I'm home. Oh shit, I gotta go to the store. God damn it. He going to get some ice cream for Auntie. I know.
See, but this is why the Matrix 4, that's why it finally caught my attention, because like the concept that you build on the day, I would take that and I would write an entire essay on that, because it sit my mind somewhere. It actually sit my thinking somewhere, and I'm like, damn, that's true, man. But I can build on it and actually turn it into a what I want to call it, a framework. Turn it into a framework. And see, that's what I talk about when I talk about the skills of information development, about moving from data to information to knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. That data has always existed. My premise is that the data, the basic raw, I don't have another word to use, so I'm gonna say information. The raw information exists in our reality, whether we see it or not. Then somebody comes along and starts to identify the raw information, and they take it and they create a framework from it. It becomes information data. To study the information and get a deeper comprehension of it in order to be able to use that particular information to change your reality, and it becomes knowledge. Then you start moving and operating in that knowledge just by automatic, systematic, remote control, habitually, without even thinking about it. It becomes your will. And then you gain the ability to break it down in a way for another human being to understand it, so they can start that whole journey all over again, and then it's your understanding. You know,
So you put the data in formation, huh?
The what? Yeah. You put the data in formation. True indeed. I like that. And that would just happen just for me just now. I'm thinking about the individual. You cannot free the damn individual. And I wonder if the enemy intentionally created the individual for that, or if just the individual just a part of that their culture. And you know how people are. We're selfish. We think if I'm a Christian, everybody's supposed to be. And I'm just using that as an example. Whatever I believe is the truth, and everybody will benefit from believing it too. You know, maybe the individual is just a part of their culture.
I got it. Before we go, I got a magic trick for you.
All right, go ahead. Bring it to life.
All right. Well, you can't hardly see it.
Yeah, north and south.
It's a pretend magnet.
Yeah.
The magnet, you know, got a north and a south pole. Yeah. So if I cut my magnet in half, I cut my magnet in half. Warren, you check me if I'm wrong, but this magnet, where I had a north and a south, now I have a north and a south here, right? When I break the magnet in half, it creates a new pole, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so now this one magnet that had a north and a south is now two magnets with a north and a south and a north and a south. Yeah?
Yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna do it again. Same thing. My pretend magnet, north and south. Now I'm gonna start cutting. I want you to tell me exactly the point where the new south pole for the north is created. You follow?
I think it's created once the paper's separated completely.
But tell me exactly where. You didn't tell me nothing.
I know. I know.
Because there's still a connection. There's still a way for
How's there a connection?
Yeah. Oh, you just cut it.
Yeah.
That's what I said.
That's what I said. I say it got to be completely separated.
Okay. So when it's completely separated, then the new south is created, right?
Yeah.
And at the same time, the new north is created, right?
Yeah.
They don't create the south, and then 10 minutes later, a north pops up, right?
No.
Huh?
No.
So the opposites, the new south and the new north, are created simultaneously.
Yeah.
Same time.
Yeah.
All right. So which came first, chicken or the egg?